There are seasons in life when the greatest strength you can show is not in what you say, but in what you refuse to say. Seasons when your life is quietly shifting, when doors are moving, when something deeper is taking shape beneath the surface. And yet, the temptation is to speak too soon, to explain yourself, to announce what is not yet fully formed. When your life is leveling up, silence becomes sacred. Not because you're ashamed, and not because you're afraid, but because growth is fragile before it is established. Seeds are not planted in the open for everyone to inspect. They are placed in the ground, covered, hidden, and left alone to grow. And anyone who disturbs that process too early risks destroying what was meant to flourish. Growth often demands silence, not because words are bad, but because timing matters. When something new is forming in your life, when change is quietly taking place, speaking too early can interfere with the very process you're praying for. Not every season is meant to be explained, and not every step forward requires an audience. There are moments when restraint is not weakness, but wisdom working quietly in your favor. Silence creates space for focus. When you stop talking about what you're becoming, you spend more energy actually becoming it. Words have weight, and when you give them away too freely, you scatter your attention. You start answering questions you don't need to answer. You start defending decisions that don't require approval. And before you realize it, your energy is divided between growth and explanation. Silence removes that distraction. It allows your mind and spirit to stay aligned with the work instead of the noise around it. There is also a kind of protection found in silence. Not everyone who listens to you is rooting for you. Some people are curious, some are doubtful, some are quietly threatened by change they don't understand. When you speak openly about what's still fragile, you expose it to opinions, doubts, and unnecessary influence. Growth needs room to breathe. Just like a seed beneath the soil, it needs darkness before it can withstand the light. Silence gives your progress that covering. Many people feel the urge to speak because they want reassurance. They want to know they're on the right path. They want someone to tell them they're doing the right thing. But reassurance borrowed from others is temporary. It fades as quickly as it comes. Silence forces you to rely on conviction instead. It teaches you to trust what you're building, even when no one sees it yet. That kind of confidence is deeper, stronger, and less dependent on approval. When your life is leveling up, conversations change. Some people won't understand your new boundaries. Some won't recognize your new discipline. Some will question why you're moving differently. Silence saves you from unnecessary conflict. It keeps you from trying to convince people who are not meant to be convinced. Not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. Not every assumption needs a response. Sometimes the wisest answer is no answer at all. Silence also sharpens awareness. When you talk less, you notice more. You begin to see who supports you quietly and who only supports you when it's convenient. You notice which environments drain you and which ones strengthen you. You start hearing your own thoughts more clearly without them being drowned out by external voices. Growth requires that kind of awareness. You cannot level up while constantly explaining yourself to people who are comfortable staying the same. There is a discipline involved in holding your tongue. It goes against ego. It goes against the desire to be seen, recognized, and validated. But discipline always precedes elevation. The ability to stay quiet when you want to speak, to stay focused when you want to announce, is part of the preparation. It trains patience. It builds inner strength. It teaches you that progress does not need permission. Silence does not mean secrecy rooted in fear. It means intentional restraint rooted in wisdom. It means understanding that some things are too important to be discussed casually. When you speak less, your words gain more value. When you finally do speak, people listen differently. Your life begins to carry authority that words alone could never produce. That authority is built in the quiet moments when no one is watching. Growth also brings sensitivity. You become more aware of how easily doubt can slip in through conversation. One careless comment, one dismissive opinion, one sarcastic remark can linger longer than you expect. Silence limits exposure. It allows you to protect your mindset while it's still being strengthened. You don't need to invite every voice into a process that requires clarity and commitment. Sometimes silence is an act of trust. Trust that what you're building will speak for itself. Trust that results will arrive without announcement. Trust that you don't need to rush revelation before preparation is complete. When your life is truly leveling up, evidence will appear. Change will become visible. Progress will be undeniable. And when that moment comes, explanation will no longer be necessary. Until then, silence works quietly on your behalf. It keeps you grounded. It keeps you focused. It keeps your growth intact while it's still becoming strong enough to stand. And in that quiet space, away from noise and unnecessary attention, transformation does its deepest work. Not everyone needs to know what God is building in your life, and learning the truth is part of spiritual maturity. There is a deep urge in human nature to share good news early, to explain what we feel God is doing, to let others in on the vision forming inside us. Sometimes that desire comes from joy, sometimes from fear, sometimes from a need to be understood. But wisdom teaches that revelation has a timing. And when timing is ignored, even good things can be harmed. What God is building in you often starts quietly. It begins as conviction, as a shift in thinking, as a call that only you can hear clearly. At that stage, it is not strong enough to stand against every opinion, question, or doubt. When you speak too soon, you invite voices into a process that was never meant to be crowded. Some people will misunderstand, some will minimize it, some will project their own limits onto what God has placed in you. And even when they mean well, their words can create confusion where there was once clarity. There is a difference between secrecy and stewardship. Secrecy is driven by fear. Stewardship is driven by responsibility. When God entrusts you with something new, something sacred, something transformative, your first responsibility is not to announce it, but to protect it. Just as you would not expose something fragile to harsh conditions, you are not called to expose spiritual growth to unnecessary scrutiny. Silence in this sense is not hiding. It is honoring. Many people lose momentum because they talk about the promise more than they prepare for it. They describe the calling before developing the character required to carry it. They share the vision before their habits align with it. And slowly, talking replaces doing. The excitement of conversation begins to satisfy the hunger that was meant to drive action. What was meant to push you forward becomes something that makes you feel accomplished before anything has actually changed. Not everyone who listens has the capacity to understand what God is doing in you. Some people only see through the lens of your past. Others are comfortable with the version of you that does not challenge them. When you begin to grow, when your mindset shifts, when your direction changes, it can make people uncomfortable. Silence spares you from unnecessary resistance. It keeps you from trying to convince people who are not assigned to this season of your life. There is also humility in not speaking too soon. When you allow God's work to mature quietly, you acknowledge that the outcome does not depend on your words, but on His faithfulness. You stop trying to manage perception and focus instead on obedience. You learn to be at peace without recognition. That kind of humility strengthens your foundation. It prepares you to handle greater responsibility without losing yourself to pride or pressure. When God is building something in you, He is often also removing something from you. Old habits, old mindsets, old dependencies begin to fall away. That process can look confusing from the outside, and explaining it can slow it down. Silence gives you room to wrestle, to grow, to adjust without feeling the need to justify every change. It allows transformation to be real, not performative. There is a season for testimony, but testimony is strongest after endurance has done its work. When you speak after the process, your words carry weight. They are no longer based on intention, but on evidence. People don't hear just excitement. They hear truth shaped by experience. Silence allows your story to develop depth. It keeps it from becoming shallow or premature. Holding back does not mean you walk alone. It means you are selective. It means you discern who has earned the right to hear what God is doing. Not everyone is meant to be part of your inner circle. Some are meant to see the fruit, not the planting. Understanding this protects you from disappointment and distraction. It keeps your focus where it belongs, on faithfulness, not feedback. When you learn that not everyone needs to know what God is building in your life, you begin to move with greater peace. You stop seeking approval. You stop reacting to every comment. You stop explaining things that time will reveal on its own. Your confidence shifts from being externally supported to being internally grounded. And in that quiet confidence, growth becomes steady, deep, and resilient. God's work is not rushed by silence, and it is not strengthened by noise. It unfolds in its own time, in its own way. When you allow it to develop without constant commentary, you give it the space it needs to become strong, rooted, and undeniable. And in that unseen place, where few people know and fewer still understand, something real is being built. Speaking too soon has a way of exposing things that are not yet strong enough to stand on their own. When something is still forming in your life, whether it's a change in direction, a new discipline, a restored mindset, or a deeper sense of purpose, it exists in a delicate state. It may feel real to you, but that doesn't mean it's ready to face the weight of other people's opinions. Words have the power to open doors, but they also have the power to invite pressure before preparation is complete. There is a vulnerability in early growth that many people underestimate. In the beginning, confidence is still learning how to stand. Conviction is still being tested. Commitment is still proving itself through consistency. When you speak too early, you place something fragile into an environment that may not be kind to it. Questions start coming. Doubts are introduced. Comparisons are made. And suddenly, what felt clear in private begins to feel shaky in public. Not every question is harmless. Some questions carry skepticism disguised as curiosity. Others carry fear disguised as concern. Even loving voices can unintentionally plant doubt when they speak from their own limitations rather than your calling. When you are still growing, your mind is more sensitive to these influences. A single careless comment can linger longer than it should. A single doubtful reaction can replay itself in your thoughts when you least expect it. Silence protects you from carrying weight you were never meant to carry at that stage. There is also the danger of emotional exposure. When you talk about something before it is established, you begin to tie your identity to words instead of actions. You feel pressure to live up to what you said, rather than staying committed to what you are building. If progress slows, discouragement hits harder because now it feels public. What was meant to be a personal process becomes something you feel judged for, even if no one is actively judging you. Growth needs room to fail quietly. It needs space for mistakes, adjustments, and learning without embarrassment. When you expose something too early, you remove that freedom. You start performing instead of developing. You start managing perception instead of focusing on progress. Silence gives you permission to grow imperfectly without explanation. It allows you to stumble, correct, and continue without the added burden of other people's expectations. There is wisdom in letting strength come before exposure. A plant that is still developing roots cannot withstand strong winds. In the same way, change that has not yet taken root in discipline and habit cannot withstand constant conversation. When you talk less, you give your growth time to anchor itself. You allow consistency to replace excitement. You allow character to catch up with intention. Over time, what was fragile becomes firm, not because it was announced, but because it was nurtured. Many people lose momentum because they confuse speaking with progress. Talking about change can feel productive, but it often steals the energy meant for action. The mind begins to associate expression with accomplishment. You feel lighter after talking, even though nothing has changed yet. Silence removes that false sense of progress. It keeps you honest. It forces you to sit with the discomfort of doing the work instead of talking about the work. When you keep things close in the early stages, You become more attuned to your own reasons. You are no longer motivated by how it sounds to others, but by why it matters to you. That internal motivation is more durable. It doesn't fade when praise is absent. It doesn't collapse when support is quiet. It grows steadily, rooted in conviction rather than validation. There is also timing involved in revelation. Some things are meant to be revealed only after they can no longer be easily dismissed. When results begin to show, when consistency becomes visible, when change becomes undeniable, words are no longer necessary. The evidence speaks. At that point, questions lose their power and doubts lose their influence. But reaching that point requires patience and restraint earlier on. Speaking too soon can also attract the wrong kind of attention. Not everyone who listens is invested in your growth. Some are entertained by beginnings but absent in endurance. Some are comfortable hearing about ideas but uninterested in supporting discipline. Silence filters this out. It keeps your circle small and your focus sharp. It allows you to grow without distraction from people who are not meant to walk with you through the process. There is strength in waiting until something is ready to stand, waiting until habits are formed, until commitment is proven, until change is lived rather than imagined. When you protect what is still fragile, you give it the best chance to survive. You allow it to mature without interference. You give yourself time to become the person capable of sustaining what you're building. Silence is not about fear of being seen. It is about respect for the process. It is about understanding that not everything strong started loud. Many of the most meaningful transformations begin quietly, away from attention, away from commentary, growing deeper before they grow wider. And in that quiet space, what was once fragile slowly becomes unshakable. Wisdom is knowing when silence is protection, not weakness. And it is a lesson most people learn too late in life. There is a temptation to respond immediately to every situation, to speak before fully understanding, to explain before action. It feels natural because the mind seeks reassurance in words and the heart longs to be recognized. But true wisdom, the kind that preserves growth and strengthens character, recognizes that restraint is often the better path. It is the quiet understanding that not every battle requires a voice, not every truth requires expression, and not every moment of progress needs to be announced. When you hold your tongue in critical moments, you are not retreating from life. You are strategically choosing how to expend your energy. Words are powerful, but they are finite in their impact when used without intention. Speaking at the wrong time can expose vulnerabilities, invite unnecessary scrutiny, or even misrepresent what you are trying to build. Silence, in contrast, acts as a shield. It protects what is fragile, allows what is emerging to stabilize, and ensures that your growth is measured by action rather than opinion. There is also a clarity that comes with restraint. When you refrain from speaking impulsively, you give yourself the space to think more deeply, to weigh options, and to respond with insight rather than reaction. Immediate speech often carries emotion without wisdom, impulsive expression without foresight, and reaction without perspective. When you pause, listen, and reflect, you make room for a higher understanding to guide your words. That pause, though it may feel uncomfortable at first, becomes the difference between unnecessary exposure and intentional influence. Some of the most influential people in history, in both thought and action, achieved their impact not by constant proclamation, but by measured silence. They allowed their work, their character, and their persistence to speak on their behalf. Words, when used sparingly and intentionally, carry far more weight. When everything is announced, nothing is highlighted. When every move is explained, few lessons are absorbed. Silence, then, is not absence but amplification, allowing what is important to rise above the noise and be recognized on its own merit. Silence is also a form of protection from outside pressures. Not everyone you encounter has your best interests at heart. Opinions, advice, and judgments can be well-meaning, but they can also divert, distract, or dilute your focus. When you speak too soon about what you are building, you invite these forces into spaces where they can influence outcomes prematurely. Holding your tongue allows your vision to mature, your ideas to develop, and your intentions to crystallize before being exposed to scrutiny. It creates a boundary that preserves integrity and allows growth to proceed according to its natural trajectory. Restraint also teaches patience, and patience is inseparable from wisdom. It is easy to feel restless, to feel that your progress or recognition is overdue. In these moments, speaking becomes a temptation, a way to assert presence or urgency. Yet patience recognizes that timing is essential. Just as a seed cannot be rushed to sprout, a process cannot be forced to reveal itself before it is ready. Wisdom knows that silence allows the appropriate season to arrive, ensuring that your actions are more effective, your results more lasting, and your voice more powerful when the time comes to use it. There is another dimension to this wisdom, the understanding that restraint preserves dignity. When you speak only when necessary, your words are received with respect. They are not drowned in constant commentary or overshadowed by impulsive reactions. People learn to listen, to observe, and to value the thought behind your voice. Words that are withheld until they carry significance are more impactful than words spoken freely, carelessly, or in haste. Silence is a way of commanding respect without confrontation, of asserting strength without aggression, and of demonstrating that maturity is often quiet rather than loud. Wisdom also grows in the tension between desire to speak and the discipline to remain silent. That tension is where character is tested and formed. It is easy to react, easy to voice frustration, easy to share victories or complaints, but the person who restrains themselves, who considers the consequence and the timing, develops depth of understanding and resilience. Silence in these moments is not a passive choice. It is an active, conscious exercise of control over impulses, an exercise of foresight over emotion, and an exercise of trust in the process rather than in immediate acknowledgement. When life elevates you, when circumstances demand discernment, and when progress is fragile, knowing when to hold your tongue is one of the most powerful skills you can develop. It ensures that what is growing remains protected, that what is emerging can take root without disruption, and that your actions maintain integrity. It allows you to conserve energy, to refine thought, and to prepare for the moment when your voice can have maximal effect. Every word spoken prematurely carries potential cost, and every moment of restraint carries potential reward. Understanding this wisdom transforms how you navigate relationships, opportunities, and challenges. It changes the way you engage with people, how you present ideas, and how you respond to pressure. It teaches discernment, teaches strategic timing, and teaches the art of influence through action rather than speech. It becomes evident that restraint is not a limitation but a tool, a form of intelligence, and a mark of a life lived with foresight. Holding your tongue when it matters most is not a sign of weakness or passivity. It is a deliberate choice to protect growth, to honor timing, and to cultivate strength. It allows ideas to solidify, plans to mature, and transformation to proceed uninterrupted. It is in these quiet moments where patience meets purpose that the most enduring change begins to take shape. The future you want is not waiting for permission, and it is not paused until circumstances feel convenient. It is waiting for action, waiting for commitment, waiting for the willingness to step into discomfort and uncertainty. Too often people spend their lives negotiating with possibilities instead of pursuing them. They wait for the right conditions, the perfect timing, or the ideal alignment, as if the universe will pause and hold its breath until they feel ready. But life does not operate on permission. Life does not wait for approval or certainty. It moves forward relentlessly. And the moment you hesitate is the moment opportunity begins to pass you by. Action is the bridge between potential and reality. It is what turns ideas into outcomes, dreams into results, and intentions into evidence. Waiting for confidence or clarity before moving is a trap, because clarity rarely comes before action. Understanding rarely precedes experience. The first step, even if imperfect, is what begins to transform the abstract into the tangible. Every person who has achieved anything meaningful started with a decision to act before the path was fully illuminated, before the world understood, and before others recognized the value of their commitment. The future does not reward perfection. It rewards momentum. It rewards those who choose to move, even in uncertainty, even in fear, even in isolation. There is a subtle difference between planning and postponing. Planning is deliberate preparation for a step you intend to take. Postponing is hesitation disguised as preparation, a way to feel busy while staying stationary. The difference lies not in intention, but in execution. The person who acts imperfectly gains insight, skill, and traction, while the person who delays only gains the burden of knowing what they could have done. Every day that passes without decisive movement compounds the challenge. The longer you wait, the more momentum shifts in favor of circumstances rather than choice. Habits form, expectations settle, opportunities close, and doubt grows louder. Hesitation has a way of convincing you that waiting is safer, that the right moment will appear, that time is on your side. But time is neutral. It does not grant favors. It does not compensate for inaction. The future is shaped by what you choose to do today, not by what you promise yourself tomorrow. Committing to action also requires courage, because action is exposure. To step forward is to risk judgment, to risk failure, to risk being misunderstood. Most people avoid action because of perceived cost, not because of lack of ability. The mind invents reasons why the timing is off, why the plan is incomplete, why others might criticize. But growth, progress, and transformation are never born in comfort. They are born in the willingness to act despite discomfort, to pursue despite uncertainty, and to create despite risk. Waiting for permission is a subtle form of self-limitation. It is an internalized belief that your aspirations must be sanctioned by conditions, people, or external affirmation. The truth is, no one is responsible for validating your purpose. No circumstance is required to grant permission for you to pursue what you know is right. Every delay that comes from waiting for approval is a delay of your own making. Taking responsibility for your action is what converts potential into accomplishment. Action also builds confidence. Confidence is not something you are given. It is something you earn through doing. Every step taken, no matter how small, teaches you that you are capable. Every challenge faced proves that obstacles are not insurmountable. Every decision executed demonstrates that you can trust your judgment. Waiting, on the other hand, erodes confidence. It convinces you that you are dependent on external conditions, that you are fragile, and that your ability to act is contingent rather than inherent. Momentum compounds over time. One choice, one effort, one courageous step leads to another. Action creates patterns that reinforce discipline, focus, and skill. In contrast, inaction compounds stagnation. Every postponed step strengthens inertia, dulls initiative, and embeds hesitation into habit. The difference between progress and regret is not circumstance. It is the willingness to act consistently, deliberately, and without waiting for perfection. The future you want is already within reach, but only if you recognize that waiting is a choice, not a necessity. The conditions will never feel perfect. The timing will never feel flawless. The support you hope for may not materialize. If you wait for all of those things, the opportunity to shape your life slips through your fingers. Action is the engine that transforms possibility into reality, and until you engage it, the life you envision remains an idea, not an experience. Trust in your own capacity to step forward. Trust in your ability to navigate challenges as they arise. Trust that failure is not final, that setbacks are not permanent, and that every step taken is a step toward the future you desire. Waiting for permission, for certainty, for ideal alignment is waiting for something that may never come. Action is available now. It asks nothing but your willingness to begin, to persist, and to continue even when the path is unclear. Every moment spent hesitating is a moment that could have been invested in growth, progress, and creation. Every excuse entertained is a barrier to the life that is possible for you. The difference between the life you live and the life you imagine is your decision to act consistently and deliberately until possibility becomes reality. The future is not passive. It does not wait. It responds to those who step forward, to those who are willing to risk, to those who are ready to move despite fear, doubt, or delay. Taking action is not about rushing blindly. It is about intentional movement, measured by courage, guided by vision, and fueled by commitment. Each step taken builds upon the last, forming a foundation that cannot be dismantled by hesitation. The life you want exists in the direction of your deliberate, persistent effort. It waits for you to claim it through action, not through promises, not through contemplation, and not through waiting for permission.